Hello, welcome to Techturks. Today I have Abisade. Abisade is the founder of Heritage Apparels. Heritage Apparels is a tech-enabled garment factory. And Abisade, welcome to Techturks. And first, before we even start, from law, a bit of finance, and now a factory worker. How did that happen?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me on the show. I get asked this question all the time. I guess it's interesting for people. Yeah. So my background, as you say, is law. So I studied law in England and qualified as a corporate finance lawyer. And I worked for several years as a lawyer in the city of London. But whilst I worked as a lawyer, I'd always had an interest in the fashion industry. Yeah. There are people in my family who have been designers and tailors and merchants of textiles. And so I guess I picked up some of that growing up. And so I set up a ladies' wear brand in London, and I was doing production in India, in Thailand, and in the UK as well. And I think I just began to think, it's a 13-hour flight from London to Bangkok, and I would have to make that trip when I wanted to see my production team. So I began to think, why can't I do production in Nigeria? We have tailors all over the place. So I came to Nigeria, did some research, and long story short, that whole path really led me to trying to solve that problem that I had, which was production. So in a nutshell, that's really how it happened.
Yeah, so who does Heritage Apparels provide services for? So who, is it like an end consumer, or businesses, or a combination of both?
Right, so it's mostly B2B.
Okay.
We have three main business lines. Of course, we service fashion brands, which is really the genesis of the business. It was in me trying to solve my own problem. So we act as production partners for fashion brands, and we do production for them. So basically, brands who want to scale up into retail, or just want to outsource production and don't really want to be bothered with dealing with tailors and just focus on their own core work, which is to design. So fashion brands, and then we also do production for corporates as well. So we provide utility wear, including things like uniforms for industrial businesses. We do overalls, coveralls. We do some PPE as well. So literally, uniforms and really high level, rather high volume orders.
Yeah. So what's the process? So like, let's say I have a business, I have 50 employees, and I want them to wear the same dress, but I want a particular design. So walk me through, if I connected with Heritage Apparels.
Sure.
What will be the process?
Sure. So it's actually a simpler process for the corporates as opposed to the fashion brands, as you can imagine. Yeah. So the fashion brands have their own process.
Their own creativity.
Right, exactly. But for corporates, it's much more straightforward. Typically, corporates would already have uniforms that they use, or they would have some idea of what they want to use. If they don't, then we can provide these design services for them.
Okay, so let's think about the logistics. How many tailors? How many tailors do you have? How do you ensure consistency? Because you're not using machines; you're actually using human beings. I know that.
Right.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to understand how a size 15.5 is going to be a size 15.5 neck.
Yeah. So that question really speaks to the heart of the issue that we try to solve in doing mass production. And so what I had to do was basically train all my staff from scratch, because I realized, having done a lot of research and having worked with garment factories in different countries, that level of skill that I wanted my machinists to have, I was going to have to train them by myself. So I brought Sri Lankans into the country for about 6 months, and they trained with us exclusively for 6 months. And so that's really how I was able to get that level of standardization that I was looking for, and that is absolutely critical in the mass production industry.
From a capacity perspective, so how many pieces of clothing can Heritage Apparel do in a day or in a week?
Right. So at the moment, about 500 shirts a day. So at the moment we have a new technical manager and production manager as well from India, who are really helping us to increase our efficiency levels. And so at the moment we're at 500 shirts a day, but we're looking to really scale and increase that capacity over the coming months and years.
So I'm going to ask a question I always like to ask, founders of business. So your business is set up, it's pretty successful, you're producing, but what were the challenges you faced in setting up this factory? Because you made it sound so simple. I found this little this used factory, and voila, we started working. Now, I'm sure it wasn't as easy as that.
No, it certainly wasn't. It certainly wasn't. First and foremost, I was not even living in Nigeria at the time, and so I had to sort of, make several trips back and forth to discuss and to negotiate taking over the factory. And again, just to say, like, we're still very much facing challenges at the moment.
Of course, I was asking you, what challenges are you facing now as well?
So we launched in January 2020. So challenge number one was COVID, because nobody put COVID in their business plan, right? Because it was so unexpected. And so being a new business and having to navigate the murky waters of entrepreneurship in Nigeria was quite a feat. For us, really, and we're still sort of battling our way through that. So that was one of the very first challenges. Secondly, I would say has been talent as well. So like I said, I trained all my staff from scratch, all the machinists. But then again, you have like the mid-level managerial staff that are absolutely crucial for the production floor to function and to work smoothly and efficiently, and still producing high quality apparel. And so, which is why I've had to basically bring in expatriates to train those managerial level staff as well. So still definitely, still going. And then of course we did some PPE during the height of COVID. But at the same time, I was faced with the dilemma as to whether to let my staff go, whether to put them on furlough or to keep them. Because of course, keeping them meant, increased outgoings for the business when we weren't really getting as much income.
Especially that you had already invested in training them as well.
Exactly.
So that was a difficult decision.
Exactly. And so that's kind of what I thought about that that made me make the decision that I ended up making, which was to retain the staff. So it was difficult, but I just felt like in the long term, it was a better decision than to, because if I had let all my staff go, then I'd have had to go through the entire process of training again from scratch, which was infinitely more expensive.
How do you create awareness for heritage apparels? How do you, and I'm sure there's also competition as well, outside competition. So how do you sell your own unique proposition
to
your own market? Exactly.
So word of mouth has worked a lot for us because we don't have an established garment factory industry or garment manufacturing industry in Nigeria at the moment. It's beginning to emerge again because we did have one in the 70s and before, and so people need the service. So just word of mouth alone has been really beneficial because people are literally looking, especially for the fashion brands.
Yeah. The question I forgot to ask: what's your minimum order, and how long does it take? So from putting my order in to receiving my goods?
Right. So it varies. So for the fashion brands, I guess because that was inspiration for starting the business, and I really understand what the real issues are for them. So we try to keep the minimum order quantity quite reasonable. So at the moment it's 100 pieces per order, which I think is very, is very reasonable. And for the other business unit, which is the uniforms and utility wear, it's 500.
Okay. I mean, are you looking at automation? So using more machines instead of human beings in the future? And what is that going to entail?
Right. So this one is a really interesting one for me that I'm beginning to consider at the moment. So of course the factory that we got came with machines, and so we're working with those industrial machines that we have. Now the world is moving very, very quickly, and so already there are a number of sort of more automated machines that we are beginning to sort of use. However, there's this dilemma for me as well, because one of the key drivers for me in this business is to create employment, especially for young people in Nigeria. And so I will be faced with that with that difficult decision or difficult challenge, I guess. So for me, I think it's a really difficult challenge that a lot of businesses are going to be faced with. But for me, I'll speak for myself in particular, as I was saying, because one of my key drivers for the business is really job creation. So for me, my own personal theory of change is that it's through industrialization that we're really going to begin to see development in Nigeria and in the rest of Africa as well.
We have no choice. We have to do it eventually.
We have to.
We just have to find new skills for those people that we're going to.
Absolutely.
We're going to display. The technology is going to display it.
Absolutely. But I think that we're still, a few years away from that.
Abisade, thank you very much for coming on to Techturks, and we'll continue the conversation offline.